Okay, so thank you very much to all of the educators, the publishers, and the technologists that are here today. I'm going to give you a snapshot of what we see happening in the U.S. education market and talk a little bit about what we're doing in the Korea market with specific educational devices and how we're bridging the gap from consumer devices to actual learning devices. Okay, so what tools are we going to use in the future to learn? We're already very familiar with a book. Books are great. They don't need power outlets. They don't need chargers. And there's something that we're used to using. But we know that fundamentally it's inefficient. So how is that going to change? And how is technology going to change your classroom and the learning experience? We already know today that students are using these devices in a leisurely way, and it's not necessarily a part of their curriculum, their academic curriculum. And our goal is really to say, why not? Why aren't these things more integrated? Textbooks are not dead. I think that there are many publishers. How many publishers are in the room? So good. So you would agree that the textbook industry is very much alive. It is really about creating new content channels and creating educational content in formats in which students and teachers and educators want to learn it. What I'm showing you here is actually a dedicated e-reading device that's specifically designed for learning and for students. And you'll see here that there was a lot of governmental support from the Korean government. This is our first educational device that we've launched. And this is something that I think is really important, especially from a publisher perspective, is the tight relationship that Kyobo has with EBS. They're one of the #1 leading educational content providers. So exclusive content on these devices, which really creates and cultivates a learning experience. Very interestingly enough about the Kyobo device is that it is designed as mom's hope. And it's mom's hope because our children today in learning really think of tablets, an interactive tablet as toys. They want to play Angry Birds, look at video on the internet. And while that's all good and fun, that doesn't help us in learning. So this device, what we look at and bring to the market is really mom's hope, but it's also dad's hope too, right? Interesting to point out, look at that content mix. A lot of children's books, 72,000 children's books, 870 video lectures. When you look at this device has the ability to browse the internet, which is important, but it does not have all of the games and all of the things that children have to deal with when they're dealing with other devices. So why did Kyobo come to us for this educational device? And this is very similar to what we're seeing in the United States too, with demand for specific educationally purpose-built devices. Is it really, how can you learn everywhere? Learning happens outside and it happens inside. If you have a substrate or a technology that can allow you to see your content indoors and out, that's great. That enables outdoor learning. So that's one of the attributes. Power crisis. So let's imagine that you do get a grant, educators get a grant to equip classrooms with tablets for learning. Can you imagine in a classroom of 40 having power outlet strips and what that would do to the power and the electricity bill? So you really want low power devices. And your students should not be scrambling back and forth to charge these devices. These devices really need to be very energy efficient. If a device can give you the look and the feel of paper, that's also another attribute. Oftentimes when we look at our mobile devices and we look at tablet technologies, there's a light that's being emitted into the eye because of the backlighting technology, right? And there's a perception and a correlation that there's possibly some fatigue that happens as a result of this. And we propose that a reflective surface, how we naturally view paper, and devices that have the same reflectance as paper, allow for what we like to call an immersive reading experience, right? Where you're really into the long format content, and it's promoting longer reading times. So this is important, we believe, and also an important consideration when we talk to educators about devices that would be appropriate for learning. In the United States, there is a bit of what we are calling a reading revolution. And that goes back to the statement that textbooks are not dead. Reading is very much alive. And as that applies to an educational environment, what we're finding is that the expectation of educators and the expectation of parents in the U.S. market is to have these devices in the classroom and to not have them be something that is used like a toy in a leisure environment, to really get these devices to the classroom. We also know that there are trends that are fueling this, and obviously this is the internet. And there's a few points that I want to pull out and highlight to you. In 2019, in the United States, it's estimated that 50% of all classes will be taught online or have a significant part of their curriculum driven by online and connectivity. So that trend of staying connected and having digital technologies in the classroom isn't going away. How many of you have teenagers? Me too. They love technology. Texting, talking, right? But not learning, right? So how do we get them to use these devices to actually learn something in the classroom? And so if we look at and this is more of a college student, a bit of an older demographic, but I think it's very, very true that children are having devices younger and younger. How many of your children have a mobile device? There's quite a few. And how about an e-reader? Any e-reader devices? So more and more we're seeing that there is an expectation to have this technology with them, and we need to make it such that these are used for learning. In the United States, of course, this is already happening. You can see here all the statistics that talk about how they're interacting with the devices, what they're doing to support their academic environment and their learning. No new surprise there. They're writing, research, taking class notes, making presentations, texting their girlfriend. That was a joke. But as digital textbooks take off, from a publisher standpoint, we know that there's a revenue dwindling, right? And that there's concern, and I propose that it really does not have to be that way. There are multiple channels for publishers of educational content to get into the untapped market in the educational environment, also in enterprise and other segments. So when we think about tablets today, we think about tablets that have really only scraped the surface. What other purposes can be used? And this is what I believe is the opportunity for publishers and really the requirement for educators. So the textbook of the future is pretty intuitive. It's interactive. It is writing on the device, maybe handwriting technology, input, output research, all the typical things that we expect to happen, study groups. And in order to really support all of that multimedia activity, we know that the trend is to really use devices that sip power and not guzzle it, right? Because of the green factor, and there's an energy draw. And so I'll just draw your eye just very briefly to what the advantages of using devices with different component technology that have an impact. And very briefly, we'll mention that Mirasol is up 1 milliwatt of power, or 2 milliwatt of power, depending on the use model, versus LCD technologies, which you can't see outside. And then, of course, electrophoretic devices, e-ink devices, great technology, but we learn in color. And we also learn in video, and we learn in multimedia, and our children will. And so these are some indicators of what those devices may look like in the future. You may be aware that in Taiwan, Qualcomm has a fabrication facility, and in the very short future, later this year, we'll complete this lovely facility in Longtan. And I would say that Taiwan, with its incredible, savvy, educated workforce that's making this technology come to pass, is really poised to be a leader in the digital education reader space. And so I'm pleased to be able to talk with you about these concepts. I'm sure a lot of this isn't new information, but it really is a reminder of how important we believe the Taiwan market is to overall global education with these devices. And I'll leave you with a very academic thought, a theory, right? Punctuated equilibrium. This states that the theory does not happen in a straight line, right? Evolution doesn't happen in a straight line. And I'll just highlight here in the bottom that change is here. It's driven by technology, and the arrival of e-books and digitization of print must happen with a consistency among educators and publishers, and that time is really now. So if I could leave you with that thought, that there are multiple opportunities, Taiwan is a leader in this space, and just to share with you that I'm pleased to be able to talk with you about that, but that the time is now for us to act and to equip our children with devices that will help them learn. 谢谢。